It's the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony Cosenza, and I am playing with some backup headphones today. I hope I don't sound too weird in doing so, but happy to have all of you with us, whether you're joining us live via our YouTube channel, via the Cincy Jungle Facebook page, one of our Twitter accounts, or any other way. If you found some sort of hack that I don't know about and you're joining us live, good for you. And I'm joined, of course, by the man, the myth, the legend, the brains behind the operation, John Sheeran. John, what's going on, buddy?
How wild would that be if we were live on live leaks or something like that? We're just on the dark web. I'd be honored, but I doubt it.
Who knows? Who knows these days? There's all kinds of streaming stuff. I mean, what is it? Twitch is another one, right? I haven't. We're not on Twitch. I haven't explored that one, and it's all kinds of different things. But hey, if there's a platform you want to see us on, we're open to listen. We're to hear you out if we're not on it and you want to see us on there and that's where you would watch it as opposed to where we currently have it. That's fine. And or hey, if you gotta catch the show after the fact, that's okay too. You can do so on the audio side of things. Of course, you can get the video afterward, YouTube, Facebook, etc. But you can get the stuff on cincyjungle.com and the audio stuff, of course, on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all of the major ones. We are there. And we appreciate the support. Leave us a review there. Give us a subscribe and a thumbs up, if you would, on our YouTube channel. We appreciate that. And all of the Cincy Jungle podcasts are on those audio platforms as well. We've got kind of a lot to get to tonight. We're going to talk a little bit Tee Higgins. We're going to talk some draft prospects and some news and or rumor mill stuff with some of the players and prospects that the Bengals have been connected to, be it mock drafts or more likely visits and that sort of thing. And then, of course, we've got a specific prospect profile from one player that they've made a recent visit with at a position that you think maybe that's not going to be in those 7 picks, but you never know. We will see. John, let's kick it off, my man. Our boy, Zim Hude. We miss him on the Cincy Jungle side of things, but I know he and our guy Ace kill it on Cincinnati. But our boy Zim kind of dropped a little bit of a nugget right around, was it Easter? Right around then, he kind of said, hey, 5's deal's done, and now number 9's next. And so everyone kind of got excited, myself included, thinking that our guy had some insider knowledge, as he's got some good connections and all of that. But no announcements have been made officially from the team or from Tee Higgins' representation on that front. But it sure has been a Tee Higgins fest on Bengals Twitter, the official Bengals Twitter. There's been like 4 or 5 different Tee Higgins posts throughout the week. I don't know if they're teasing us or what's going on.
I mean, it's definitely a tease. Like, they've admitted as much as, noticing what the collective we talk about and everything. And I'm sure they saw that Higgins was trending, so might as well get some Higgins content out there. I think it started with, it was like a picture of all the receivers like in the locker room after beating the Ravens to win the AFC North. And I feel like that was more of a slight towards like the Ravens, like in how they signed Odell Beckham, and that one Cardin clown was like talking about how the Bengals fans are like scared or something like that. Like, yeah, sure. I think the Bengals are probably fine and not too concerned about that. And then there was like some like tweets about like wallpapers and stuff. So yeah, Tee Higgins is a popular commodity in terms of traffic on the internet. I think he's trending on Twitter right now because there was another article about how can the Bengals pay all 3 of these guys, all 3 being Joe Burrow, Tee Higgins, and Jamar Chase. But yeah, Zim has made it very abundantly clear that he's not a reporter. That's not what he's on here to do, but he does have connections and he does hear things. And I don't believe Zim to be someone who would put something out into the ether if he didn't have something that made him believe that it was true. But he did mention that there is no timeline necessarily on this. It's just a matter of, hey, like, negotiations are at a good point. Maybe there's some type of agreement in principle, but like it's not quite there yet. But again, there's months to go on this if they want to get it done before the season. I think the way I took it is like the relationship between 2 sides is in a good spot. Like, there's obviously enough money on the table to do this. I think the fact that they gave Orlando Brown $31 million up front at a position that none of us really expected them to really target, knowing that they were trying to pay Burrow and Higgins, it kind of gave us a good inclination that there was enough money on the table to do all of these things, and it does seem like we're in a place where it's probably going to happen. It's just a matter of when.
It's a matter of when. I mean, Higgins grew up as a Bengals fan, right? Ended up with the Bengals in Cincinnati. Has had a really successful career. I know while he gets a lot of shine, and rightfully so, he does get outshined a bit by Jamar Chase and some other players on the team, but he still definitely gets his credit and his very, very due credit, because he has been very good since joining the Bengals, and a big part of their success for sure. And of course, the team being successful, he gets highlighted even further. So I think if the money is there, obviously the passion for the team and the team being successful, all of that is playing into it. And again, we go back to some of the comments that Duke Tobin made back at the combine. Get your own. We're not, I mean, it was basically, we're not trading him. You know, there's talk about it. We are not trading him. And yet, even through all this, like you said, there are these talking heads out there that just cannot believe that the Bengals will be able to afford or will pay multiple receivers, multiple star players on their team. That we're the collective Bengals fan base and all of us who cover the team and root for the team and everybody, we're shaking in our boots about OBJ joining the Ravens and all kinds of different facets that have been just. I don't know, man. It feels like other people outside of the Bengals bubble are just like, man, we don't want this team to be good. We don't want this to take place. It almost is like this very targeted, directed. I don't want to call it hate, but just a wishful thinking that these last 2 years haven't happened for the Cincinnati Bengals. If you're looking outside of the bubble, am I weird in thinking that? I don't know.
I think it's the idea of paying a quarterback the next highest, biggest, largest contract in NFL history, along with two receivers that are going to, if not reset the receiver market, get up into that upper echelon. That idea is rare, obviously. Like, no team is doing that, and I don't think any team outside of maybe the Philadelphia Eagles are planning to do that. Andre Parada, a friend of the show, brought this up pretty poignantly today. Like, where's all the skepticism about the Eagles paying Jalen Hurts and paying Devonta Smith in a couple years while paying the back half of A.J. Brown's contract? Like, there's no real questions with the Eagles, and I think because the difference between the narratives of the Eagles front office and the Bengals front office, like, that's more or less why I think these things are popping up. Because if the Bengals of all teams, who are notoriously frugal in the area of free agency, are paying two top receivers and a quarterback, then there's no excuse for other teams to not do the same. And I think that kind of makes people upset. Like, hey, if the Bengals are doing this, why isn't my team doing this? Why isn't this team doing this? And this goes back to what we talked about like last month. It's backwards, the thinking of what's going to happen and what should happen with the Bengals. It's never been about, okay, what players are the Bengals going to keep because they're not going to keep Tee Higgins? No, it's what players are they going to be able to keep, or where are they going to have to supplement talent on the roster because they're keeping both Higgins and Chase along with Burrow. This has been their plan for at least the past year or two, ever since Chase joined the team and realized that he was as good as he was, and they realized that he was worth keeping around and building around. They have no intent on letting any of these three go. Now, whether or not Higgins actually does sign the deal, or if he leaves in free agency in the next 2 years or so, that remains to be seen. But this is definitely the plan, and if all goes well, it's what's going to happen. And then the Bengals are going to have to figure out how to build the team around them, but that's where the conversation needs to be. It's not about, okay, is it smart for the Bengals to pay Tee Higgins or not?
Yeah, I mean, we may, if it doesn't go into long-term contract territory, maybe we're in franchise tag territory, but a lot of time. But again, a little bit of run this week in terms of like, hey, is the T deal done? We'll see. I think there's, we had the pleasure of talking to Tee Higgins earlier or late last year, towards the end of the year, and you can tell he's involved in the community. He's been successful on the Bengals, and I think both sides definitely want to get this done. It's just a matter of when. And to your point too, John, you mentioned about how the Bengals were notoriously frugal in free agency, and really the trend has been bucked over the last 3 off seasons, right? Going into 2020, 21, 22, for 3 or 4 seasons, I would say. But you're looking at that and you go, okay, well, the sample size before that was 20, 25 years in free agency. So, I mean, maybe that's just where some people outside, while those of us in our Bengals bubble recognize what they've done, the money they have spent in free agency, those outside of the Bengals bubble talk about free agency, talk about who they have and haven't paid, and they look back at the sample size, though it is 4 or 5 years in the past, there's about 20 to 25 years of it to look at.
And there's also still a disconnect on like what it actually means to pay all three of these guys, because people still look at it in terms of they take the average annual value and they just assume that that's the cap hits for the life of the deal and everything. And obviously there are cap implications with this, regardless if the cap is going up or not. Like the cap hits for all three of these guys are going to be pretty monumental down the road, but it's mainly about cash, right? Like I went over a Tee Higgins contract projection for A to Z Sports, which you should definitely check out if you haven't already. And it's going to look pretty similar to the deals that Deebo Samuel signed, AJ Brown signed, DK Metcalf signed. All three of those guys got at least $20 million in year one cash and around 30-ish, $35 million in cash in the first 2 years. And that's totally reasonable for the Bengals when you're talking about paying Tee Higgins, considering, again, they just paid Orlando Brown $31 million, at least $31 million in year one cash for this season. So it's going to be that for Tee Higgins. It's going to be something, extraordinary for Joe Burrow this year if they get that done as well. And I think that's plausible considering everything that they've done in the past year or two, all the success on the field that they've had, all the success off the field that they've had. They're in a position to do this financially, and I think they're forecasting it enough where, like, okay, we can spread out the cap hits in this way and we can get this done. But it's mainly just about a cash thing, and I don't think that's a problem for the Bengals anymore.
Naming rights to the stadium, naming rights to the practice bubble, all of that and more in terms of putting it into an account, an escrow account, if you want to call it that, or some nest egg to divvy out to these star players that they want to get extended and keep around for a while. And speaking of naming rights, there's a question here from our good friend Crypt Keeper. I think you put out a tweet or something about, hey, was there something about like the most random account you're banned by or something like that? I almost chimed in on, because I'll chime in on the air here, but I think, are you blocked by the Pro Shop? Is that what he's referencing there?
I am blocked by the Bengals Pro Shop on Twitter. I don't know why. I think a long time ago, this was like 3 years ago, I may have said something critical about the team or critique the team in some way, and I might have rubbed the feathers wrong of whoever runs the Pro Shop Twitter account. I don't think it was a DM that I don't remember sending drunk that I pissed them off or anything like that. I honestly do remember the Pro Shop following me, and then I saw like someone like at them, and then I checked out their profile and realized that they blocked me. I have no idea why. All I know is not so long afterwards I went into the Pro Shop and bought something and felt really awkward doing so. Like, is someone here working, like, are they offended by me in some way? But it hasn't changed in a few years. But I don't know. Like, I stopped thinking about it entirely until I saw that tweet and said, yeah, I forgot about this.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do that cool behind the scenes jersey unveiling type of thing. So, I mean, you got to be in some good graces somewhere. So, I don't know. Maybe it was so long in the past that they forgot to unblock you. That's okay, though. I am blocked by Vontez Perfect. So, I must have said something, God, I don't know, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, something that, I never at players. That's not really my thing. So, I don't know. He must have got wind, or I wrote an article or something that, I don't know, maybe complained about the wild card loss, or I don't even remember now. It's so long ago. But, hey, Tez, I hope you forgive me. You can unblock me at any point, but that's another random story for another random time. We have another question, though, and this is a good segue into a little bit of draft prospect talk and visits and all of that. And then it'll segue nicely into our prospect profile. But Rick Shop, who chimes in on the show, tunes in on the show, good to hear from him. Do you guys think we have a shot at getting Georgia's tight end, Washington, 6'7", runs a 4.6"? We've talked a little bit about him, John. I think he was mocked somewhat recently by Mel Kiper Jr. to the Bengals in one of his mock drafts. He's a guy where the size, the measurables, all that kind of stuff, you go, wow, wow, wow. And then you look at the numbers and the actual production and you go, where is it? But a guy that, obviously he's one of the top tight ends in this year's class. I can't remember off the top of my head. He doesn't seem to be a guy that they've been meeting with or showed a ton of interest in, at least not as much as a guy at the same position in Dalton Kincaid. We profiled him on this show, a guy I personally really like. Obviously, there's questions about the medicals, but those have recently been cleared up as well. Bengals met with him twice now, right?
Yes, they have. So they met with basically every single major tight end in the draft aside from like Lucas Musgrave at the combine. That includes Darnell Washington, but no, they have not brought in Washington for a meeting, and nothing, again, seems to indicate that they're that interested in him compared to other tight ends like a Dalton Kincaid. So Dalton Kincaid officially got clearance from a doctor yesterday regarding his back injury that he suffered at the end of the 2022 regular season, and it's basically reported that like he was basically taking it easy and not really putting any stress on that back, and that led him to not doing any offseason workouts or testing this offseason, not because he probably couldn't, but just because he wanted to just be 100% fully healthy by the time that he was drafted. And the same day that the report came out, he was cited at CVG in Cincinnati or Northern Kentucky, and he took a visit with the Bengals. And that makes him now the second prospect that we know of that has met with the Bengals extensively, I should add, at the Combine. He had like the longest meeting out of any tight end that they met with at the Combine, and also took a private meeting or a top 30 visit with the team this year.
So the Bengals are doing their due diligence at tight end for sure. One other guy now that's starting to get a lot of run, and I think there's a lot of chatter that he might be the guy for the Bengals with their first-round pick should he be there. They love first-round cornerbacks. They've got long-term questions a little bit at cornerback, a little bit of short-term questions at cornerback too. I mean, they brought in Sidney Jones as a potential Eli Apple replacement. They've got Cheeto, who's one of the best corners in the league when he's healthy, but he is coming back from that knee injury last year, so we'll see how they ease him back into things. Cam Taylor-Britt showed some nice progress at the end of last year, but Forbes now out of Mississippi State, right, is a guy that is really getting kind of some attention in Bengals circles. A guy, a lot of coverage skills, willing tackler, good length, but the weight, playing weight. I think he weighed in at the combine, 170, 165, sub 170 maybe.
166 was the official combine weight.
Yeah, so now you're looking at him. He's supposedly beefed up to 175-ish. I think he caught the message from NFL teams that he may need to beef up a little bit. But this is a guy I know that a lot of people are high on. I know Joe Goodberry likes him a lot, and a lot of others like him a lot because the ball skills, the length, the speed, the willing tackler. It's just that weight at the next level is obviously the big concern.
Yeah, can we I want to have this discussion. It doesn't have to be extensive, but like the movie Moneyball was kind of centered around finding value in players that were otherwise, ostracized for not looking the part necessarily, and that's why the Oakland A's basically got them for cheap and went on to have this a very successful season. Emmanuel Forbes just fits the Moneyball profile just perfectly because for everything about this guy, as a player, as a person, every single box is checked. It's not like we like him just because we like him for no reason. No, there's data behind how good he is. There's film that supports how good he is. I think he's interviewed very well. He seems like a great person. He seems like a great teammate. Everything. The only thing that people are hung up about is his weight. Now, I don't know if the 10 pounds that he's added from the time of the combine to now is good weight. I know that he's long. He's got a long wingspan, so he's got a frame that he can fill out. And I know that because he said this, that he plans on playing at least at 180, 185 when the season begins, which is fine for a 6'2", 180-pound quarterback. That's essentially the dimensions that Dre Kirkpatrick was when he was the Bengal. Now, Dre Kirkpatrick compared to Emmanuel Forbes doesn't compare because Dre Kirkpatrick was never as productive, not only as a tackler, but as a coverage cornerback compared to Emmanuel Forbes. The fact that this guy had a 95 percentile solo tackle market share in an SEC defense, it tells you everything that you need to know about his physicality and his willingness to get in there despite his playing weight. Like, you only care about 166 if it shows up as a negative on tape. And it just doesn't. Going up against the best athletes in college football, he's getting in on basically every tackle possible. For a guy who's at that size playing cornerback in the SEC, that amount of tackles compared to your team's tackles is very rare, and it's a huge indicator of success at the next level. If Emmanuel Forbes is 195 pounds right now, he would not escape the top 15 picks. But because he's 176 right now, and he plans to gain 10 more pounds, he's potentially going to be available to the Bengals at 28, and I can't think of a better pick, honestly, right now than him right now.
The question about the weight is a good one, and again, whenever you hear, I've seen this so many times over the years that if it usually occurs with a player who's deemed a tweener, whether it's an edge line or outside linebacker, or some of those types of players where they either gain weight or they lose weight. Well, they're losing weight so they can gain a little speed. Well, then they can't shed blocks as well, potentially on defensive purposes. And then the other way, they're gaining weight. Well, then they lose speed. So that's something I always, granted, we're talking about a guy with a light frame and good speed anyway, but you are talking about adding essentially 20 pounds since, in a couple of months is what he's aiming for since the combine. So that's something to watch in terms, is that going to affect his speed? Is that what's that going to do to him? Is it good weight? Like you mentioned, I'm sure it is. But he has the frame to add in extra weight because he's got that length and everything there. I'll take it a step back from your Moneyball analogy and sound like the dummy that I am. Just in coaching players, various sports and whatnot. One thing that always kind of stood out about some players is the quote unquote gamer thing, right? And what I mean by that is you have a player on your team, to your point of not looking the part, or the expectations may not be as high for a particular player. And so you either, they don't get as much playing time, they don't start as often, or you ease them into the lineup, that sort of thing. Yet every single time that player gets in there in a game situation, an important situation, they just play well. They step up, they play well. And some of the things that to your point, the preconceived notions, the different things that tell you that the athleticism may not be there, the size may not be there, this, that, and the other thing. And you just put a guy in a situation and they play their ass off and they play well. And this guy already has a lot of the skills. So there are obviously, there's not a lot of things to knock in terms of preconceived notions against him. It's really just that weight. But like you said, you put on the tape with this kid, and unfortunately we're talking a lot about him, and he's not the guy we're previewing this week, but we'll try and maybe get to him next week. You put on the tape with this guy, there's tenacity, there's length, there's ball skills, there's speed, there's really the whole package. And really, if he can add on good weight, it just kind of seems like this is the guy on a very, very short list the Bengals should look at, should he be there.
And I want to address something that our friend Andrew Woods in the comments said. You draft players in the first round, they should be starting and contributing, not sitting like last year, referring to Dax Hill, who, might end up being a good pick considering what happened with the Bengals safety room. The draft is obviously not about finding first-year contributors. It's finding young talent that's under contract for 4 years that can help you in the long run. And obviously a premium position like cornerback only enhances the argument to take a guy like Emmanuel Forbes. But even beyond just the long-term outlook of this, which is obviously positive, he would be immediately the Bengals' third cornerback on the outside. Obviously, cornerback 4, considering Mike Hilton is in the slot.
Right.
Cornerback 4 for the Bengals, that's been Eli Apple the past couple of years, and he's played a ton. In the past few years now, the Bengals have relied heavily on immediate cornerback depth because injuries are just inevitable. You play 20, 21 games a year, guys are going to break down. They ran into it with Trey Waynes, with Chidobe Awuzie last year. They've had guys play unexpected snaps because they've had to, and that's not going to stop. You can't just expect Chidobe Awuzie, coming off of a torn ACL, mind you, to play all 70 games, and Cam Taylor-Britt. If that does happen, that's amazing. Emmanuel Forbes can take the year, maybe play some snaps here and there and just work on just building some core strength. But odds are he's going to play, and he's going to play very important games because you need cornerback depth. You will always have to rely on cornerback depth every single year. So, yes, he wouldn't be penciled in as a starter this year, but I promise you, Emmanuel Forbes will play hundreds of snaps this year if he's a Cincinnati Bengal.
I agree with this sentiment from Andrew Woods. if you're a team that is coming off a 4 or 6 win season last year, right? If you are a team that has roster holes, you use that first round pick and you say, you better be a pretty high impact player for us. Look around on the Bengals roster. Which starters immediately getting replaced with a first round pick this year? Maybe right tackle, depending on whatever the hell they do with all the options that they currently have right there. I mean, you could, I guess, talk about left guard, but Volson, I think they like him. There were some nice moments last year. I mean, running back, I guess. I mean, you can make an argument there. I guess. I mean, there's really not too much of a and then you go, well, what about safety? Well, you just drafted a guy first round last year who's going to step into the role this year because of the departures. So that's why you drafted the guy a year in advance. So I get the sentiment, and I've been I've been in line with that thinking for a long time. You want a guy that just doesn't have a redshirt year necessarily, but the Bengals roster is in much better shape than it has been in so many different years under so many different head coaches that these last couple of seasons, they haven't needed the guy to come in and be like, oh man, we need a guy, we need an immediate edge defender. And this is also in part, John, because of what we just talked about a minute ago, and the Bengals doing more and hitting home runs in free agency and outside free agency to fill those roster holes and not need a first round pick to come in and be the savior of the franchise right away.
And that's how it should go, right? The Bengals used to take this, draft not for need, but for value and for talent when they weren't as active in free agency. And that led to some roster deficiencies, right? Because sometimes they wouldn't draft for immediate impact, and people would get on Marvin Lewis for not playing rookies, but the team still had holes that it refused to fill with competent veterans. Now you're getting the best of both worlds. Now the team is still relying on that philosophy in the draft, but they're attacking needs in free agency with competent players and also not breaking the bank in doing so. This is how you want a team to construct a roster on a yearly basis, and I don't think that's going to change this year just because all their needs are more or less filled. Like, immediate impact this year would be tight end, it'd be running back. If you get like Bijan Robinson, you're obviously not keeping Joe Mixon. Like, he would come in and start. Again, other than that, I don't like three technique would play in tandem with BJ Hill, much like a cornerback would probably end up playing hundreds of snaps behind, Taylor Britt and Awuzie because of injuries. Like, it's all kind of in the same bucket outside of maybe two positions on offense and tight end and running back. There's conversations about the value of that in the first round anyways, which we all talked about last week, and how it's not as pressing at 20th overall with that argument. But still, if you're only drafting your first round pick for just how much he contributes in year one, you're leading yourself to potentially open up to problems down the road where you have a first round pick at one position that you don't really need, long-term help in a couple of years now. Like, that's just not the outlook to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, even the positions you mentioned, I guess running back would be the major outlier because that's fluid because what are they going to do with Joe Mixon? We're not totally sure. There was a newer development in that whole situation. Tight end, yeah, that's another one you could bring to the table. But even Irv Smith, I think they have an idea that Irv Smith is going to have a pretty high-profile role in this offense going this year. So even then, you're talking about a heavy rotational player with a first-round pick at best. Maybe a starting running back if that's the route you go. We'll see. But that position is where we're going to go next before we get to our player preview. And my co-host doesn't know I'm going to do this, but I got to pop this up here in case you all have not read this, and I'm going to pin this in the live chat because John, you did this, you put this together, and this was outstanding work, my friend. And sorry I didn't give you public kudos until right now, but this was very well done. John put a lot of research in this, and this is all about the running backs, and now that's another position that is getting a lot of run for the Bengals in this year's class and where they might go early. Talk, first round, second round, third round. There's a lot of different talk about where the Bengals may go here, but talk a little bit about what you covered here, John, because I thought this was really good. You talked about height, weight, rookie age, MSA score, and then of course college production and how that fits certain profiles. You talked about a lot of guys here. Talk about the kind of the profile you compiled here And then of the names you brought in here, you see, Bijan, Charbonnet, all these different guys. Who was the guy that you felt like? Because I kind of have an idea now. Who was the guy when you put this piece together where you were like, this is probably the best fit for the Bengals in this year's class if they want to make a significant move at running back?
So the work was done basically trying to find the critical factors of what the Bengals looked when they seriously invested at running back. Like, obviously, they've taken guys like Rodney Anderson, Travion Williams, Chris Evans is another one, but I feel like you can't always look at later round prospects to determine like what a team looks for in the position. When they've seriously invested in like a future starter or an immediate starter at the position, they've typically done in the second round, but I included Mark Walden in there just because I feel like the pick for running back
Mark
is going to be
Walden.
between it's going to be between rounds 2 and 4. So I just threw Mark Walden in there because his overall data also stacked up comparatively to that of Joe Mixon, Jeremy Hill, and Giovanni Bernard. All four of those guys weren't really used as much in college compared to some of the other workhorses in this class specifically. Like Hill, Mixon, and Walden didn't exceed 400 carries in college. Giovanni Bernard had 423, but Bernard, Hill, and Mixon just played 2 years. Like, they weren't even like redshirted. I think maybe Gio was redshirted as a freshman, but they just have 2 years flat of playing experience, and then they left for the NFL. Mark Walden, I think, had 3 and was injured 1. So again, his workload was pretty on the lighter side. So that was something that stood out. They're also pretty productive. MSA score essentially accounts for market share relative to your age and the strength of schedule that you played. It's again really indicative of future success. All of them were pretty young, right? Only Giovanni Bernard
Very young,
turned 22 in his rookie year. I think Jeremy Hill did as well, but Joe Mixon was like 20 when he was drafted. And I think the same goes for Mark Walden. And in terms of size, not a ton, but I think 200 is probably like the soft threshold that you can look for in terms of who's going to be the next Bengals running back. I wouldn't go too far below that. So combining all of that, there were like 7 running backs that pretty much fit every single target. And the one that stood out the most to me was probably Kendry Miller, actually, out of TCU, because he fit the size. Not a ton of workload on his body, but he was really productive at TCU in the year that he was featured. And I think that's not really going to matter. The fact that he wasn't featured until his final year, I don't think that really matters that much when they look at running backs. But he comes into the NFL with fresh legs. The only downside with him is that he's currently injured, and that's why he didn't test. But just looking at all the data and just factoring in, like, maybe they would want someone on maybe the slightly bigger side to maybe like handle the workload going forward. Like, he just stood out. Like, Israel Abinakinda also stood out too, but I just don't know. Mm-hmm. He's just all over boards right now, and I feel like there's just some questions about his ability to, like, break tackles and, like, generate yards after contact and stuff like that. But he also makes a ton of sense just looking at his raw data too. Rashawn Johnson, another guy, like, I think he was there for 4 years at Texas, but he only carried the ball 390 or so times. So he comes in with, again, a light workload, but he's by far the biggest out of these guys that fit the thresholds. He's 6 foot, 220 pounds. Again, only 22 years old. And despite not carrying the ball that much, he was still relatively productive for being behind Thompson-Robinson all those years. So, yeah, these guys just stood out in ways that the others didn't. And if there's one guy who got cut from these 7 who I can definitely see the Bengals investing in, it's Zach Charbonnet. Just because he was slightly over 500 carries, because he played 4 years in college, he didn't fit the threshold, but I can see him being an outlier in their eyes just because he checks literally every single other box.
Well, this is excellent work. I meant to tell you when you put this out, my man. This was really well done. You could tell there's a lot of work put into this. But I agree with you. I was a little bummed that on your short list, Charbonnet wasn't there, and it looked like he was maybe just a tick or two off in a couple of areas that made him not be on there. We did, I don't know, was it last week we talked about Charbonnet, or 2 weeks ago, I think. We profiled him, so go check that out in case you want to check out some clips and what we had to say about him. I will say Israel Abikanda is the guy that I think it would intrigue them a bit, just from a versatility standpoint and potentially value where he may be drafted. This is the guy, though. I know he's lighter. I know he's smaller. Jahmyr Gibbs. This is the guy. I don't know that the Bengals would pounce in the first round. I think the board would have to fall a very certain way. top tight ends, probably Mayer and Kincaid off the board, maybe a few of the right tackles. Cansey's gone. I mean, a lot of their guys that you're looking at that have been mocked to them, Forbes gone. This is a guy to me, though, that look at the MSA score that jumped out to me. You see the career receptions. He's got some carries, but not a ton. The receptions, the versatility, the age, the size is a little concerning, but I think just the skill set, the age, and that MSA score that you put together there, that's the guy that jumps out to me. It's just a matter of where do they value him? Is he a first round pick? Can he be had in the second round? How's the board going to be falling? That's the guy though that stands out to me, man.
Hey, it's a Popeye's biscuit away from 200, so I'm not really concerned about the weight. I think he'll be probably 205, probably if not this year, then next year for sure, which is essentially the same size as Gio. I mean, just his profile screams a more productive Gio. Like, he was by far the best receiving back in all of college football, and if you're looking to find ways to create a more explosive offense, despite defenses doing everything in their power to prevent that, get a receiver that can not only run great routes out of the backfield, but can generate easy yards after contact. He is just such a natural lighter and just makes these insane cuts with the ball, man. Like, he's going to be good immediately. He's going to be good for probably the whole life of his deal. And I did put up a mock draft today where the Bengals traded back and maybe took Gibbs in the 30s. So check that out too.
All right. Well, I didn't pin that one. I'm sorry, but a guy that was this one was really good, and I know running back is a big point of conversation with Bengals fans and Bengals circles. So definitely go check out that article. I pinned it in the live chats there. Really, really good stuff. But yeah, I mean, a couple of names. I think Israel stands out to me. I like Roshan, but I think a thing that scares me a little bit is just the fact that kind of a backup back, is he a benefactor of just some of the things that Bijan and that offense does? I don't know, but he's an effective player. I think the Bengals met with him recently, did they not? So he may be. I have to look at that. There's been so many meetings. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
At any rate, a couple of guys on there that really stand out to me, and I think Gibbs is an exciting player. I'm not all about the Bengals. We talked about that argument last week about where the Bengals pick, positional value, all that kind of stuff. But I'm not super high on going running back in the first round. But I think if the board falls a certain way and that guy seems like the best guy available, you may want to pull the trigger there. We'll see. One position that the Bengals are settled at, but they are not settled at the backup spot. They did not re-sign Brandon Allen. And they brought in Trevor Siemian for a visit, but that did not materialize into anything. And so, John, the Bengals had a pre-draft visit with a very versatile, athletic, and exciting quarterback prospect here. And yes, I went University of Cincinnati last week with the prospect profile. So, yes, I am going back. I'm going back to the Pac-12. There's a lot of Pac-12 guys that intrigue me this year. I mean, I know sometimes I reach for some, but there's a lot of guys that kind of intrigue me this year from the Pac-12 because really the Trojans were good last year. The Bruins have been good the past couple of years, and this guy is a major reason why. Quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson, a dual threat guy, but a guy that has shown a lot of progress under Chip Kelly, which is both promising and I guess for some it may be a little concerning in some ways because it's like, how much is that the system and the coach? And we'll talk about that because I've got some clips and everything. And I got to tell you, man, his clips are fun. And here's Albert Breer reporting it. This is on CincyJungle.com. The Bengals are hosting UCLA quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson, a top 30 visit today/tomorrow. They want to probably go, and this is where that guy would go, day 3 as a backup, QB2, QB3, depending on the development that he shows early. And you would hope that the development would come early, would be shown early, John, because he is a fifth-year guy. He's a fifth-year redshirt senior, a guy who has started in games in all 5 years for the Bruins. And again, the things he has done the last couple of years have been really short of remarkable. I think what he has shown has been really, really awesome stuff. Here he is right here. We'll go full screen on this bad boy. UCLA quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And why are we talking about quarterbacks? Well, I just told you, because the Bengals hosted him for a visit. 6'2", 203 was the recent weigh-in. He is 23, turns 24 in the middle of the season. He's a senior, a redshirt senior from South Carolina. A lot of athleticism and a lot of cool things on tape that you can see from this guy, and we'll get to that in just a second. Had a good 40 time. I think it was 4.56. That'll come on in just a second here. 4.56 40 time, and over 10,000 career passing yards, so close to 11,000 as a matter of fact, close to 3,200 of those last year. 88 passing touchdowns in his career, 27 last year. A 63.3% completion percentage in his career, close to 70% last year, which is awesome. 157.4 rating last year, 145.6 as in his career. 36 interceptions, just 10 last year. 1,800 yards plus on the ground in his career, 645 of those last year. And so you look at stuff, John, and here's the thing that that's a wow. 37 total touchdowns and over 10,000 passing yards. Here, look at this play. Just strike down the middle. Here's Dulcich time, by the way. You want to know why he went higher than a lot of people thought. That's why. Nice. So what I've seen on the high arcing balls, sometimes has a little bit of an underthrow tendency. You see here, back foot, that guy was just wide open, so it kind of floats a little bit. But some of the balls zing across the middle. Look at that throw. I mean, that's just unbelievable. Granted, that guy was wide open, but this is another nice one. A little underthrown, but you can see zip across the middle, gets over the couple first lines of defense. This guy carries it into the end zone for a nice score here. This is another one, zip through defenders in stride. That's just a hell of a throw right there. But there's a trend you see here, John. RPO, 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 RPO. Nice play to Dulcich again. Great throw, although he was wide open, and great play by him. Look at this. So, a lot of this stuff comes out of RPO. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing if you're the Bengals, because the Bengals have run a number of RPO plays. By the way, this play is incredible. It just breaks about four different, I think this is against Bowling Green, breaks about four different tackles and takes it, 60, 70 yards for a running score. This is an awesome play here too, where shows the leaping ability and whatnot. We'll talk about his RAS. Look at that. Wow. Woo! Yeah. And then this one, we've got another little leap for you right there. That one's pretty awesome for a first down. Yeah. So you look at this here. Here's the RAS, a little lower than you think, but it's mostly because of his size. You look at the elite speed grade, great composite explosion grade, and you see the broad jump and the vertical jump, broad jump over 10 feet. That's awesome for a quarterback. Poor agility grade, which is a little, that's kind of the lateral movement stuff and different things like that. So elusiveness in the pocket. He can dodge guys that are coming after him. He is awesome on the RPO plays, particularly the ones that have the line drive throws in the intermediate areas. You saw some of those zip plays across the middle. He's got the speed and athleticism. That's not a question. Again, solid and short and intermediate passes. He is inconsistent on those high arching deep throws. Nice spelling error by me right there. Huge improvement with age and high end coaching. So again, the last 2 years, he's shown a lot of great improvement as both a runner and a passer, decision making, confidence in the pocket and doing things like that. But is he going to need elite coaching to be a successful QB2 at the next level? And so again, best scheme fit as well is a question for you. But man, you see the athleticism, you saw the nice jumps over guys and big plays. The zip balls across the middle. That's what kind of surprised me as I went back. I saw a lot of this guy over the last couple of years, but those zip balls across the middle, I obviously remembered him from, a couple nice passes, but running the ball really well and being an effective dual weapon. Some of those intermediate passes off RPO were things that I found to be really, really impressive with this kid.
So he's got an arm and he's got legs, which makes him the opposite of Brandon Allen, essentially, which is totally fine for me. Like, I feel like a lot of fans kind of carry the sentiment. I think we're seeing some of the comments like, it doesn't matter who the backup is because he's not Joe Burrow. 100%, right? It was whoever the Colts coach was back in the day when they said that, like, they don't practice without Peyton Manning because we don't practice effed, essentially, right? So, yeah, if a backup quarterback isn't for Joe Burrow, it ultimately doesn't matter in the long run. But if, God forbid, there's a game, there's like a half where they have to play without Joe Burrow, I think you do want someone with more upside and just more unpredictability and just allows you to do more to potentially win a game in a pinch surrounded by a great team. Now, you can try your best to just complement a guy like Brandon Allen who's limited and needs to have a perfect pocket and needs to throw off a perfect base and everything to keep on schedule. But I think with Thompson-Robinson, like, he can create out of structure and he can create on his own, and he can provide you that spark if you need a win in like the last quarter or two. Now, again, this is a lot of praise, I guess, for a quarterback who's not going to be drafted very high in the draft, but I think it did him a lot of favors to stay in school for as long as possible, because you did see that growth with not only his production, but I think in his game as well. I think he might have to work on his throwing motion a little bit. I think he might have to tighten that up just a little bit. But again, as a backup, he will have plenty of time to kind of develop all those mechanics and everything. But I think it's good that the Bengals are showing interest in quarterbacks, not only who are young that can develop under Burrow, but just provide different things and better things than a guy like Brandon Allen or even Jake Browning can provide.
There's two schools of thought with this. I mean, of course, you'd like to have someone. I mean, there's not a carbon copy of Joe Burrow out there. If there was, every team would be clamoring for one. But, what I mean by that is, someone that resembles a little bit of the skill set where there's just enough nimbleness in the pocket and, you can have a high level of accuracy potentially. And I think that's kind of what drew the Bengals a little bit to Trevor Siemian in some ways. He can move around the pocket and has shown the ability to be accurate at the next level. And there's also, not that, this kid's DTR is, a complete opposite of Joe Burrow, because he runs the RPO stuff. Burrow moves better and gets more rushing yards than a lot of people give him credit for. So, I mean, there's kind of some similarities there as well. I think even with the close to 70% completion percentage by DTR this year, I think, Burrow's just known as highly accurate, pinpoint accurate, that sort of thing. I don't want to say that he's not pinpoint accurate, but I mean, I wouldn't say that's the absolute strongest asset of his. But to your point, John, you said, you want a guy who has some upside potentially if there's a, holy crap moment where you got to have a guy in there to come in there and try and keep the ship afloat. Let's say Joe Burrow just misses a series, a quarter, but comes back. What this kid provides is, even if he's not, especially early, if he's not so comfortable in a system, or, man, I don't know if I can go through 3 progressions right now as I'm a rookie, whatever. He can still, with athleticism and with different elements that he brings to the table, that zip ball across the middle that he can throw, I think he can still kind of keep a defense a little bit on its heels, even for a brief moment of time in a game, and move the football down the field if the Bengals need that. Now, again, we're talking about a contingency plan that nobody wants to ever have the team to ever use. But again, contingency plans are in place for a reason. And so the Bengals have been exploring these options. And if, God forbid, there is some sort of issue where Burrow has to miss some time, maybe the upside, the athleticism, and the dual threat that this kid brings is something that would intrigue them enough that they feel they can, develop and have a good QB2 on their roster.
When would you take him? Like, are you considering taking a quarterback just with 7 picks, or would you prefer if they traded back and like picked up an extra 5th or 6th or something?
In an ideal world, I think you'd want an extra pick to be able to be like, hey, and then we can use one of these. He's going to go day 3 is my opinion here. I don't think there's any question about that. I don't think I think it's probably going to be like a round 5 type of situation. That's kind of where I see it. I think teams will look at, not only the last 2 years of work, but the athletic profile of this kid and be like, there are tools here. There are a lot of tools here to work with. And is he ready to start for an NFL team tomorrow? Maybe not. But I think he's a guy that I think he's wherever he goes, you're going to see this kid in the preseason games because he'll get a lot of work and you'll be like, wow, this guy's just shredding teams in preseason. that won't translate necessarily right away to the regular season. But I think you'll see things early from him that'll be like, wow, this kid's got skills. And so I it's kind of a little bit of the situation with punter for the Bengals too, right? Where it's like, well, do you really want to use a pick on a backup quarterback that or a punter or what have you? I mean, it kind of depends on where the other pieces fall, where the board falls, and all of that. Ideally, again, you'd want to get another pick or two by trading somebody or trading back, that sort of thing. But the more I think about this, it would not surprise me if the Bengals say on day 3, we want a developmental guy that we want to work behind Joe Burrow as a backup.
You know what? DTR, Jake Browning, Pac-12 battle to carry Joe Burrow's Microsoft Surface. Let's do it.
Let's do it. I know it's probably not the sexiest topic, talking backup quarterback, and I guess that where the Bengals are in such an enviable position that they don't need to necessarily, talk about all the top end quarterback prospects in a class. But again, you need to round out your roster, and you need to get the most talented players possible, be it at a backup position, rotational player, what have you. And this kid provides a lot of upside for sure.
Oof. So, I mean, there's him, there's Clayton Tune, there's, I think, Aiden O'Connell that they met with previously, the quarterback out of Purdue. So it's a very real thing, and I feel like this has been not talked about enough. Just the fact that Burrow is entering now his second contract, and Brandon Allen was entering his third. It just makes a lot of sense to actually start developing a quarterback. I believe they took A.J. McCarron in the 5th round the year after Andy Dalton signed his extension. So you gotta look at these trends, man, and it does add up.
Yep. Well, that is our draft profile this week. We may have a couple of others for you next week. Well, we will have at least one for you next week. We'll keep this rolling as long as you guys enjoy them, and we'll try not to have the lovely spelling error that I saw right there. That was just terrible. But regardless, hope you enjoy them, and we'll keep them rolling at you. What do you got as we get out of here, John? Drop the mic and get out of here.
Nothing much. I guess beware of what you say, or the pro shop will find you. I don't know.
I guess I'll say this. I want to ask a question of you. If we were to continue doing these prospect profiles, would you what conference? Because I know I focus on my Pac-12. What conference would you say, hey, Anthony, let's go with this conference next time?
You know what? I think we should give a shout out to some of the small school guys. I think I have one in mind, but yeah, maybe someone not from the Power 6. I don't really care about the American anymore, just because he's not in it. But I guess we can bunch them in there. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll try and work a few in. Maybe we'll do a show's worth of a handful of them. I don't know. We're getting down to the wire here. We got just a couple weeks left till the draft. I can't even believe it. But we'll be doing a lot of stuff for the draft on draft weekend. Hopefully, John, you'll be able to join me for at least some of that and break down a lot of different things on this show, on CincyJungle.com, and of course on John's new stomping grounds, A to Z Sports. Go check that out. Appreciate all of you. John, appreciate you, my friend. And we will catch up soon, talk a little bit more draft and more small school guys. I guess we'll look at that.
2 weeks away. Let's do it.
Take care.